We are live on Instagram and Facebook. Okay. Hello. So, tonight, I really just want to talk about how difficult it is for survivors to even speak their truth. And then to come forward with the justice system. The justice system is so backwards. None of it makes any sense at all. The way of doing things to receive justice really is just not okay. I posted something yesterday about believing survivors and how important it is to believe survivors, because it really is so important. A lot of people, when you come forward, a lot of people will just immediately question the person and their motives and wonder, why is this person talking about this? Or why is this person looking for attention? When in reality, that's not at all what the survivor is doing. They're focused on their healing. Like for me, this is so healing for me to come on live and speak about these things. I know that I'm helping so many people, and I know that people are really looking to relate if they feel alone. But it's truly difficult for you to actually move forward in the justice system because of the whole procedure and how everything is done. Everything falls on the victim and the survivor. Everything falls on us. And we're looked at as the person who did horrible things, when in actuality the perpetrator is the person who should be being looked into. But we live in a country where everybody is innocent until proven guilty, and none of that is how it should be. For instance, what happened yesterday with Bill Cosby and his entire case just being overturned like that, when all of those victims came forward and really shared their stories. It's so hard for the victims and the survivors, because we put ourselves out there and we're really explaining what happened to us so that we can receive justice. And that's ultimately, it's a really small percentage of justice actually being served. And it's not okay. For instance, like for a child, if a child were to come forward and disclose, it's up to the child to explain what happened to them. And then the child will have to face their perpetrator, face their abuser, and in court, and speak about what was done to them. Like, none of that is right. None of that is okay. Everything is just so backwards, and it shouldn't be like that. It really shouldn't. And you'd think that by 2021 things would have changed by now. You would think that there would be a different way of getting justice, but it hasn't happened. And hopefully it happens soon in my lifetime. But it was definitely upsetting to see what was decided yesterday It's horrible to see. And for my own situation, me coming forward in I've had multiple different abusers, I've explained that, but me coming forward, I've had different outcomes each time, and none of them have been justice. And I'm still waiting for some. I explained in one of my lives that I was actually looked at as doing wrong, when in actuality I was the one who was sexually assaulted. And that was back in 2012, 2011. And I have there's so much wrong with what happened to me in that situation, because in the state of Rhode Island, like I had mentioned, my abuser audio recorded the assault, and that was legal. Like, why is that legal? They said that if he video recorded it, then it would be illegal. Like, how does that even make sense? It doesn't make sense. I did not give him my consent to audio record, to do anything. I mean, he assaulted me in the first place. And then not only did he do that, but then what were his motives by recording that? And the police didn't even ask. The police didn't even want to know, why did he record the assault? They just looked at me. That's what I have a problem with, because it's literally are we not going to focus on the fact that he knew exactly what he was doing and recorded the audio of the assault? How is that not something that the police wanted to focus on? I am just so baffled about that. It's not okay. That is not okay. And they just looked at me as, why did you fabricate and fluff up the story? And it was because I didn't think you guys were going to believe me in the first place, And again, I had no experience reporting a crime. This was my first time reporting a crime, and I was terrified. But yeah, so that was one circumstance. And then the other circumstances, the police, it's not funny, but the police said to me, "What took you so long?" The male police officer was standing there with the hands on his hips and looked at me and said, "What took you so long to report this?" And it was extremely graphic in how he asked me. As I'm explaining first of all, this was not even in a private room. This was in the station, in the police station, in the lobby of the police station, in public. He's all right, what happened? Rushing me along. And I'm whew, okay. Explaining to him what happened to me. And the first thing out of his mouth was, "Okay, what took you so long? This happened, okay, and is there a reason why why you're coming forward now?" I'm okay, well, I didn't even know what was being done to me. A lot of people don't even know they're being sexually assaulted because it's not talked about. So I didn't know what was happening to me. So that's the first reason. The second reason is I'm terrified. I could keep going, but it's why are you looking at me? And then the next thing that was very graphic that he said, he was all right, okay. Well, was there penetration? It's are you kidding me? That's if I wasn't at the place in my healing journey when I went to the police station to report, that would have really put me back in a place mentally where I would have not been okay. But because I was at a different place in my life where I was really focused on my healing and in therapy and everything, I was able to comprehend a little bit more, and even though I was not happy with the police and how they spoke to me about it, I was able to be like, all right, whatever, unfortunately this is the way the system works, and this is what I have to do if I want charges to be brought against the abuser. This is what I have to do. So it was almost like I had to bite my tongue and just be like, yes, there was, and yes, this happened, and yes, it took me a long time to report, but this is why. And if someone else had gone, a victim or a survivor in that time had gone to the station and had a similar interaction, I don't know if that victim or survivor would be okay mentally. I know I wouldn't if this was at a time when I wasn't able to do that. So I don't know. It's just not okay. And unfortunately, a lot of people, first of all, don't know this is happening to them. And then second of all, are terrified of what's going to happen to them. For instance, Voices Against Violence. Oh no, it's, I can't think of the name right now, but I think it's like Voices Against Violence, but they will specifically focus on the rights of the victim and make sure they don't go into the sexual history of the victim, because that is how much the court cares about the integrity of the victim rather than what the perpetrator did. Everything goes into the victim. They're like, okay, is this victim able to, so for a child, they focus on, is this a competent enough witness? Can this child adequately say what happened to them? Can this child adequately understand what a truth and a lie is? Can this child be able to sit in a courtroom with the abuser there and speak about what was done to them? Why are you putting all of that on the child when you have a child molester? Why are you putting it on the child to basically tell their story? I mean, it's just, it really gets to me. The system literally makes no sense. And I don't understand why we live in a society where you're innocent until proven guilty, when you have enough to even press charges on the person. You know that this was done, and now it's up to, the police have one job, and then they say, okay, there's enough charges, and then it goes to the court, and then the court's like, yeah, is there really enough charges for this? Do we want to pursue charges? Do we think we're going to get a win out of this? Ultimately, that's all the system cares about is, are we going to win this? And how is that serving justice to the victim and the survivor? It's not. They look at you as a case file, and that's what you are. You're not even a human being. And then you don't even know who the judge is. You don't even know that judge's story. That judge could have a past where they were perpetrators, and nobody reported them. And they had, you have no idea who these judges are, but they have all the power in the world. They're the ones that make that decision. You are guilty or you are not guilty. It just doesn't make any sense to me as to why this is how things are done. And it's cruel to do to victims and survivors. And with what just happened with the Bill Cosby case, it's like all of these women are now feeling defeated again. And now they have to pick themselves up again. And hopefully they're all in therapy, and hopefully they all can get through this, because it's like they're being traumatized all over again. And that's usually what happens. Like, so for me, because I've experienced domestic violence and sexual assault, like, it's so hard to get into, but like when my children's father was arrested, they had I wasn't even able to comprehend like what was even just done to me. Like, the police came to the door, and I had mentioned, like, all I could say was, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for coming. And, you know, he was arrested, he was taken away, and the police stayed with me, and then they had to focus on the facts. Like, they were like, we just arrested him, and now we need to get the information from you. So they had a patrol officer, and meanwhile, this is like 2:30 in the morning, so they had to get a sergeant to come. And then now the patrol officer and the sergeant are like taking pictures of my body to take it into evidence. And I had to write like a voluntary statement and explain like what happened tonight. And I'm not even able to process like what just happened. Like, meanwhile, I was still heavily in the cycle of domestic violence, where I was like, okay, this is my children's father. Like, I still had love for him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just got him arrested. And now I have to write what he's done to me. And like, there was just no time to think. And meanwhile, I had to figure out, because I was hurt, you know, they had to have the ambulance come, and I had to figure out, like, my 3-year-old and my 6-month-old are sleeping. Like, what do I do? And I was 10 weeks pregnant, and I was focused on the well-being of the baby in my belly because of what was just done to me too. So I'm like, I have to get to the hospital, but like, I can't leave my kids, and I have to write this statement. They have to take my pictures. Like, it was just so much was happening in my brain. And then now I was still talking to my family at the time. So my sister came and stayed with my 3-year-old at the time and my 6-month-old at the time. But I had to now get in an ambulance, go to the hospital. I mean, thankfully, they did tell me that because I was 10 weeks pregnant, like, there was a really high chance of me losing the baby, especially because of what was done to me. Like, he was repeatedly kicking me in the stomach, and I was being strangled and suffocated. Like, any woman who's pregnant going through stress in a pregnancy is not recommended, you know. So the amount of stress and then like physical strain that put on me, they had to watch me and make sure everything was going to be okay. And they did do an ultrasound. It was too early to hear a heartbeat or anything like that, but they saw the baby and they were like, okay, the baby's moving. Like, and I had to go have a follow-up with my OB/GYN like after that. But yeah, like that, there was just so much happening. And like, even at the hospital, they're asking me all these questions like, you know, do you feel safe at home? I'm like, no. I'm here for this. Like, the ambulance, they were all able to explain like what I was there for, but you know, the doctors and nurses had to hear it from me too. So then I had to explain like again, like I already just told my story, which was just like a little glimpse of the story, but like of that night, like at least 3 times before I got to the hospital. And then now I'm telling them again, because then they had social workers come at the hospital, and then I had to tell the social workers what was going on. Meanwhile, I haven't even had time to like process any of this. And it doesn't even feel real either. Like, I can't even believe what is happening to me right now. And then I don't even know what the worst part of this is, but eventually I get discharged. I come home. I told you my sister was with my 3-year-old and my 6-month-old. I come home, and the Department of Children and Families is already at my door waiting for me. So now I have to, meanwhile, I haven't slept because this was like 2:30 in the morning. I got discharged around like noon because they had to like watch me and make sure like the baby was okay and everything. And so I got discharged around like noon maybe. And the Department of Children and Families is already outside my house waiting for me. And now I have to be interviewed by them. They're asking, like, they have notes. Like, one of them, there's 2 people. One of them have to interview my 3-year-old, like, in a private room and ask questions like, does your dad hurt your mom? Does your dad hurt you? And my 3-year-old's like, what is going on? Meanwhile, he woke up to like his aunt and not me. And he's like, what is going on? And so like my sister had to like be like, okay, yeah, well, mommy will be home late. Like, I don't even know what she told him, honestly. And then now I'm home, and now there's like DCF at the door, and we have to like, and they're like taking my son to explain and interview him and question him. And then me, I'm like terrified because I had already had DCF in my life because of my children's father, like when my son was born. So I was like reliving trauma because DCF is there for like a purpose. Like they have a really important job, but like nobody wants DCF in their lives. Like, so I'm terrified. Like, I'm literally like, oh my gosh, like I'm in trouble. And it's like, I wasn't in trouble, but I was in trouble to them. Like, they were like, you are putting your children at risk. You're putting yourself at risk. And I remember them telling me, like, if you cannot keep your children safe, we will have to keep them safe for you. So now I'm risking losing my children. And after all of the questions, and I was at a place in my healing. I wasn't even where I'm at now. But even then, I was like, I'm just going to tell you everything. I'm just going to tell you everything. And I just like started telling them everything. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I just told them so much. Like, are you going to take my kids? And they're just typing away. Meanwhile, one of them is still interviewing my son. But anyway, I'm answering their questions. And then they're like, well, you're going to have to give us a minute. They were concerned because I hadn't slept. And they're like, you're going to need to have somebody like stay here so that someone needs to help you take care of the kids right now because of like you haven't slept. So anyway, they go outside, they call their supervisor, and they're outside for like a while, basically trying to decide if I was going to keep my children. And it was the scariest. I just kept looking out the window being like, what are they going to say? Like, am I, and then they end up coming back and be like, all right, if you can have someone stay with you, like for tonight and everything, like you can keep your kids. And I was like, thank you. Like, what? They're my kids. Like, I don't even know. My thought process was like all over the place. Meanwhile, they did go to the Medway police station to interview him too as he was arrested. But yeah, so there was just so much going on, and I think everything's just backwards. Like, nobody pays attention to like what the victim and survivor just went through before they're just doing but at the same time, it's like I understand that they have a job to do, and I understand like everything that they're doing and their purpose. Like I get it, but at the same time, it's like nobody's having any empathy at all for what I just experienced. It's just like we have to go through the motions, like we have a job to do, we have to get this done. And like I was just so grateful I was able to keep my kids, you know. But it wasn't the end of them. Like they're there for a while checking to make sure if I'm going to go back to him, if I'm going to keep my kids safe, if I'm going to enroll in therapy, if I'm going to, like, I just feel like I have no control. And it was so difficult for me because I was born into domestic violence and never had control. So it's like I had to like ask them for permission to do anything. It's just really scary. And I really wish there was a different way. Like that's just a glimpse of what I've experienced. But like, I really wish there was a different approach for how things are handled for the victim and for the survivors. Like there has to be a different way because it's really doing a disservice to the victims and survivors. So yeah, I think it's a tough conversation, but it's a necessary conversation. And in the chats, I'm seeing like a good amount of support. Thank you guys. And then someone saying they went through a similar situation and it's so scary, and it absolutely is. It's terrifying, especially because like you're a mother and these are your children and you don't know what's going to happen. And meanwhile, for me, it's like I didn't even, like I'm not the abuser. Like I wasn't causing my children harm, but in their perspective, they're like, look at what is being done to the children because you're allowing yourself to be harmed. And that's literally how they would word it. And I'm like, I'm not allowing myself. I remember my therapist saying like, it's not like you put it on the calendar. Like today, my children's father is going to abuse me. Like today, he's gonna do this. Today's gonna, it's not like I was like a willing participant and scheduling it into my day. Even though he was abusing me and the likelihood of him abusing me today, tomorrow, the next day, like was high, it wasn't like I was allowing him to do it to me though. So the way they worded things was just re-traumatizing me all over again because I'm like, but I didn't allow him. I was not. But then I also get their point because it's like, look what was being done to my kids because I stayed with him. So it's like, I get it. Like, I know they have a really important job, but it's absolutely terrifying. So, yeah, I think this is like a good topic. So if we want to talk about this again, I'd love to. And I think moving forward, I would love to have guests join my lives. A couple people have reached out to me for wanting to do that. So if you're ever interested in doing that, you can message me. I think it'd be great. So, but I appreciate all of you who have joined and who have been sending me support and have a similar mission. I really appreciate it. And thank you guys so much. Have a good night. Bye.